Welcome to this week's episode of Thoroughly Entertained. This week, Chris and I saw the new blockbuster, Iron Man 3, and we're going to talk a little bit about what we thought of this season of the new FX show, The Americans. Please visit our website and enter your email address so that you can get our big summer movie guide so that you know what's going down at the theater every weekend.
In the new movie, Iron Man 3, Tony Stark is haunted by the demons of his past, and he now must face a new terrorist who will stop at nothing to bring down the United States government. So, I know I really enjoyed the new Iron Man movie. What did you think about it?
I thought it was terrific. I thought the action scenes were great. I thought the acting was good. You and I both agreed that we really liked how much they beefed up Gwyneth Paltrow's role as Pepper Potts. There was some flaws in the story.
Of course.
There were a few flaws in the story, but otherwise I thought it was a really, really entertaining movie and a great way to kick off the summer movie season for sure.
I have to totally agree. I'll be honest. When we went to the movie on Thursday night, I was in a foul mood and was not really happy. It's not that I wasn't looking forward to seeing Iron Man 3, it was just a bad day. And within just a few minutes, I'd been completely sucked into the story. I was laughing at the jokes. Robert Downey Jr. is spectacular as Tony Stark, is this cocky and arrogant and still likable guy as much as he's got these other flaws to him. And I thought it was a strong, well-done movie. And I was not a fan of Iron Man 2. And so this was really positive for me to see how much better this was. And this really brought me back to all the characteristics of what I liked about the first Iron Man movie.
Yeah, and I think it was really strong because so much of the movie is Tony Stark outside of the suit.
Absolutely.
Because I think Iron Man 2 suffered from the fact that so much of the movie is him in the suit that the movie ends up being really impersonal, and you don't get a lot of the Robert Downey Jr. charm as Tony Stark,
right.
And it ended up being flawed in that way, whereas in this movie, he's a lot more vulnerable. You see him outside of the suit, you see him in mortal danger a lot of times, you see him have to rely on his wits and ingenuity and his own physicality to overcome some long odds, you know.
And those are some of the best scenes.
Yeah.
Like, I love when he's, like, shopping at Home Depot or wherever, you know, like...
To MacGyver some weapons together,
creating, like, his gardening glove tool, and, you know, like... And it's fun to see those sort of elements because, you're right, it humanizes the story, it makes the action scenes more real because he doesn't have the security of the suit to protect him, and I appreciated that about him. Even there's one scene when he's being trussed up and he's like trying to get his suit to come to him, and the other guys are like, "Ooh, I'm so scared by you," and he's like, 1, 2, 3, and he's like, and the guys are like, "Ooh, when is it gonna come now?" You know, like, and I just thought that was funny because like the trust and the confidence that he was going to be rescued was there.
He just didn't know when. It was coming.
It was just hard to convince the bad guys that it was going to be there. And I can imagine them going, "Yeah, right, like you're going anywhere soon." Anyways, I just thought, you know, scenes like that were really funny and amusing and made it a strong movie.
And they added in a few things about how Tony Stark is having that he was having like severe anxiety and like panic attacks about, you know, the aftermath of what happened in New York in the Avengers movie, because for the first time in his life, he doesn't know everything about the world around him.
Right.
You know, there's things out there that exist, and there's threats out there that exist that he can't possibly anticipate. And so he says early in the movie, about how he can't sleep, and the reason why he spends all this time tinkering on the Iron Man suits is because he can't bear the thought of losing Gwyneth Paltrow. He can't bear the thought of losing Pepper Potts. He says, you know, you're the one thing that I can't live without. I have to protect the one thing I can't live without. And again, that just added another level of emotion to the movie and gave Robert Downey Jr. even more to play with, which made it even better.
Right.
And you know, there's a sequence where he's dealing with this kid in rural Tennessee who's helping him out, and the kid keeps jabbing at him about the stuff in New York, and it's starting to freak him out. And even as you can see, the anxiety's taking over him. He's still like shooting quips at the kid and like trying to deflect things because his go-to safety mechanism is just deflect humor. That'll protect me. You know, if I make light of things, then they're not so bad. You know, but again, those scenes are great with that kid. They're so funny, and you know, you look at this and you understand why Robert Downey Jr. is a movie star.
Absolutely.
There's a reason why this dude is a star. The same with Sherlock. He's so great in those movies. Like, it's easy to understand.
I do know that one of your biggest weaknesses for this particular movie is that you felt that the villain wasn't strong enough. Why don't you speak to that?
Well, I really liked what Ben Kingsley did as the Mandarin, especially when they showed like the video clips, kind of like, you know, the Bin Laden tapes. They echo the Bin Laden tapes where he would put the video out of him going death to America and stuff. And I thought that those scenes with Ben Kingsley were really interesting.
They were.
But you don't get very much of that Mandarin. And, you know, we're not going to reveal like a couple of the plot twists, but you don't really get enough of that to be fully invested in how dangerous the Mandarin is. And the villains that you do see a lot of in the movie, you don't really know very much about. You don't understand why they're such a threat to Tony Stark. They have abilities that don't make any sense. That you know, and again, like, you know, a suit that should be able to stop a tank shell. You don't understand why these guys are just ripping the suits to pieces and like they're no big deal.
Right.
Like, you don't get it.
Well, and for much as many like gaping plot holes or inconsistencies in the story, I ended up giving the movie an A- because I was thoroughly entertained. For the type of movie that it was, it did everything that I needed it to do to be a great time at the movie for me. You disagreed a little bit.
Oh, well, I gave it a B+, and the only reason I graded it down a little bit is because being the first of these Marvel movies to come out since the Avengers, I think it was kind of in an unfortunate position to be compared to the Avengers, which I think was the best of the Marvel movies so far. And especially the villain in the Avengers is Loki, and Loki's awesome. Loki is the best villain of any superhero movie in recent memory, for sure, other than maybe the Joker from The Dark Knight.
Right.
He's the most charismatic, the most interesting. And to not quite have that level of villain in this movie, while I gave the Avengers an A, I had to scale this down a little bit because I didn't think Tony Stark's foil was as interesting, so I gave it a B+.
All right, now for The Americans.
We've really enjoyed watching the new FX drama The Americans this season, and we're going to talk a little bit about how the show has wrapped up this first season storylines. Okay, well, Chris and I, we watched the season premiere of The Americans together, and we talked a little bit about it on our video earlier. But we wanted to kind of look at the season as a whole and think about what we thought about it. I think it's an incredibly strong show. The writing is good. The acting is terrific. I think it's an interesting subject. But there's kind of one issue that you and I both have about it. I want you to speak a little bit about that.
Absolutely. The big issue that we have is that I think because the show is on FX and a cable shows have a tendency to push boundaries in areas because they have a little more leeway than network or broadcast television is allowed to do. And the area we're talking about specifically is sex. And as strong as the stories are and as strong as the acting is in this particular series, there is far too much sex or gratuitous sex in the series. And I think it cheapens the value of the story. I think it cheapens the audience that actually watches and sort of commits to a television series like this. Like, I just think it weakens overall the strength of what is a spectacular series.
It just seems cheap to me, like it's a stunt that they're hoping will draw eyeballs to the show. Like, we haven't really spoke about the show very much because neither one of us is very much a fan of it, but it reminds me of how Girls, the TV show Girls, throws in so much, like, there's so much gratuitous nudity in Girls that it's almost like, hey, who knows what you'll see this week if you watch. Whereas I don't think if a show's writing is that good that you need to resort to those types of things. And for the material on The Americans is great. Right. The writing is great, the acting is great. Like, it almost makes me feel like the creators of the show are worried that nobody will watch it if they don't put these, if they don't make these gimmicky sex scenes or throw in these stunts of like, oh hey man, you should have seen The Americans last night. Oh, hubba, hubba. Like right. None of them really advance the story in any way. Like, I understand that in something like espionage, having a beautiful woman being able to use her body to get men to do what she wants to do is a fact of that
right,
business. Is a tool of that business. But again, like, the way they show it seems very exploitive. I don't know any other way to say it.
Oh, I agree. I think it exploits the women who are the actresses on the show, and in some instances even exploits the men, because I just think, you know, they're so talented and so strong, it's unnecessary. So as a result of that, we can only give, as a series, The Americans a B, because it is so fantastic, but that degrades the overall quality of the show.
And they seem, and the first few episodes didn't have any of that. And the first episode, the premiere episode, did really good ratings, and I guess the second episode didn't do as well. And it almost seemed like from that point forward, they made a conscious effort to like shoehorn those scenes in. And it may seem like we're going on and on about this a lot, but it sticks out like a sore thumb. And the show is tense and it's interesting,
right.
And there's a level of realism to it that really makes it stand out among these types of shows on TV. And it's made with such quality that, again, like, it's disappointing. And if you watch it, I would be surprised if you didn't find those things jarring and pull you out of the story when you saw them.
Right.
Like, I just can't see how you wouldn't feel that way unless the only reason you watch the show is for a glimpse of side boob or
Butt.
bare ass. Like, if that's what you're tuning in for, then you are getting what you paid for. But for me personally, I
don't want to see that in my television series.
Yeah, and I think it makes it a show that you can't watch with your kids.
No, not at all.
There's not that much violence, so you should be able to watch it with your kids and be able to talk about
The Cold War, that era,
and
yeah.
But this makes it so that you can't watch it with your kids. It may also make it so that you would be uncomfortable watching it with your spouse, which I think is a difficult thing for a show like this. So again, if they toned that down in the second season, I would really jump my grade up because the material of the show it's A material, but I only enjoy it to a B level because I'm always worried what the next scene's going to be and if it's going to make me uncomfortable.
Right. Well, that's it for this week's episode of Thoroughly Entertained. Make sure to go to our website and enter your email address so that you can get our free summer movie guide. Next week, Scott and I are going to be discussing the new Baz Luhrmann movie, The Great Gatsby, as well as seeing how close of a translation it was from the actual book. We'll also be discussing the new comedy Peoples. As always, make sure to check out our website at thoroughlyentertained.com and join us on our quest to be thoroughly entertained.